This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to Synchronicity. My guest this week is Colin Frangicetto, and Colin has been around the scene. I've seen Colin. This is one of the what year of the current incarnation of MindPod Network are we in? I don't know, 3, 2.5, something like that. Really around the time Eli was born. That's how I can these two things happened at the same time. MindPod Network's kind of new genesis and Eli, my son. And tonight, happy to share with you, we'll be finding out the gender of the newest addition to the clan. And let me tell you this, people. Let me tell you this. Yes, that was a not so subtle illusion that there is another child on the way, due sometime late June, July, early July. We don't know the gender yet, but we're finding out. Alexis is surprising me somehow, and Eli. I don't know how she's doing it. We'll find that out. So we'll have that news next week. But let me tell you something. For all those people out there, you're reading those reports, and they say, "Hey, you know what? You smoke a little weed. You're not going to mix your sperm weird. You're going to end up with weird kids. You're not going to be able to conceive. It lowers your sperm count." If anything, it seems to be the opposite. I would describe child making, at least in our household, related to the consumption of marijuana as it helps it. If anything, minimal efforts are needed to sire childs if you're smoking weed. I don't want to make that direct correlation, but that's obviously bullshit and propaganda. I don't care what studies the scientists want to bandy about. Here's the truth about any negative studies about weed and any overtly positive studies. This is just an important thing to think about. And it's not just for weed, it's for anything. Just look at the sample size and look at the funding. That's all. Look at the organizations who are doing and running the science things. Look at obviously, if you know what a well-designed experiment looks like, look at that too, but not all of us have that knowledge. But those two things, sample size and the funding, will really tell you probably more about than the actual study. A lot of these studies you read, you'll say some crazy, insane thing they found out in the lab, and it's like 17 people. Like 17 people participated in a study, one time. Anyway, back to Colin. Colin has been around the scene. He's been on a lot of other podcasts. Go check him out. Astral Hustle, Third Eye Drops. What I heard him on was Sean and Cass's Very 8 podcast. Still one of my most favorite. They're just such wonderful people, and you'll hear us extol their virtues throughout this episode. And one thing that we spoke about very early on is just kind of how when you hear, you don't even need to meet them. That's what's so bizarre now. But when you hear certain people speak, when you see certain people speak, and you don't want to always jump to conclusions, but sometimes you're aware of a very subtle, below the surface frequency that you go, oh, these people are really genuine people. It doesn't mean that they're great all the time. It doesn't mean that they're the perfect avatars of being the best people. And we get into that in the episode, but you recognize that they're being very transparent and authentic. They're not putting on airs. It is not a persona. It is something that is just, that's who that person is. And yes, there does seem to be a correlation for people who either consume a lot of psychedelics, LSD, or have taken it and at an early age. And that's something else that we discover in this episode, or at least I discovered, is Colin took LSD at a very young age, much like myself. He took it younger than me. I was 15. He was 14, which is, he really nails on something. I think that for those of us who have had that experience, it's like your mind is already changing so much. To throw in a psychedelic really has an interesting effect. Could be good, could be bad, could be neutral. Probably neutral, right? See what happens with it. But that is a very interesting thing that I don't meet a ton of people who have taken psychedelics at a very early age, kind of in a similar context. Like you're not you didn't by accident take it. You did not know what it was. Like you kind of knew what it was. So that's interesting. Anyway, Colin is a musician. Have I not pointed this out? Circus Survive is his band. He's an accomplished musician. He's playing at venues that sell out large numbers of tickets. He is an accomplished artist. He draws. He makes these amazing art prints. He does installations. He's just one of these people who does a lot of things, but does them well. There's a lot of people who do a lot of things. It's very easy to overextend these days, right? But he does things and does them well, which is fucking awesome. And kind of more importantly than all of that, more importantly, although that's very important, is he's just a very nice and authentic and genuine person. And it's wonderful to speak to people like that. Go check him out at colinfrangiscetto.com. If you don't know how to spell that, look at the title of the podcast. That's it. It's easy. There's even links in the podcast episode, so you can look there too. That is all for this intro. Without further ado, here is Colin Frangicetto. Well, I'm excited to talk today, buddy. The most recent reason I reached out is I was talking to Sean and Cass, and they were like, "Listen, have you had Colin on yet?" And I'm like, I see him everywhere. Of course, like we're connected on social media. I've tuned into like parts of podcasts, but I've been like really busy and I haven't. But I see he's a really cool guy, and they're like, "No." They're like, "No, you really got to tune in to Colin and like see what's going on." I'm like, all right, if Sean, and I've heard you on the podcast with them say this, like, I think for people who recognize what's going on, like if they're wholeheartedly endorsing someone or something, I pay attention to it because they're just such wonderful people. So it's like, all right, that will be the impetus for me to actually get in touch with Colin and have this. And I'm super happy that they did because I got to tune into you, man. And I am very, very impressed in a genuine, not in what you've achieved type of way, but in kind of like who you are and what you exude. So I'm looking forward to this, man.
Thanks, man. Me too. That's so flattering. And oh my God, I don't think I could possibly love those two and like more. Yeah, they're just like the best.
Yeah, they really are. They really, really are. All right, man. So like I have a bunch of little notes I jotted down just from listening to you that popped up, but I thought a cool place to start is not dissimilar to what you talked about with Sean and Cass on Very Ape, but just personally very interesting to me is kind of the backstory and origin story of how you've maintained an artistic career for yourself kind of through the trials and tribulations. But just like for people who don't know, you are a very accomplished and successful musician. You're a visual artist. You do drawings, you do installations, and they're like legitimately awesome. There's a lot of people who do a lot of shit. And it's like, your stuff is awesome. Like, I was wondering if you could tell, and share with people listening for as much as anything, like, what's your backstory and how did you maintain this kind of, we're not young anymore and you're still kind of doing the art thing, which is fucking awesome. So how did this come to be? What's the backstory?
Sure. Well, I guess, I mean, I've been making stuff since I was a little kid, and it's like every day that goes by that I, get older, I sort of have this blurry memory of where it crossed the line from like fun and like kind of self-expression in order to stay sane to the way that, I pay my bills. And it's like very kind of surreal to sit here and realize that like, holy shit, like I haven't had like a legitimate clock in job now for like probably 15 plus years. And I was like, I'm putting together a little like catalog of my paintings right now, and I'm writing something for it. And that was kind of like what I wanted to write about was just where like where did I cross the line into embracing the notion of being an artist and living an art life and all that. And I think it's hard to say when it started, because the things that really, I mean, you could say, oh yeah, well the first month that you paid your bills,
Right, right.
whatever. But it's like, no, it starts so much further back. And realistically, I think it really just always starts with like a leap of faith, of just like, and a decision to not want to go one direction but go in another. And I think for me, especially when my band Circa Survive started, I mean, we basically made a choice that we only wanted to focus on basically making music and art, and just no jobs, and just kind of wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I think just the active decision of saying we're going to do this and we're not even going to allow for the possibility of the other thing,
Yeah.
puts you into this almost completely different mindset where you're ready to steal from grocery stores. You're ready to do anything you need to do in order to keep that going. And I think it also keeps you very satisfied with the smallest of things. It's like, everything is good. I'm not getting my possessions taken away right now, and even if they did, they don't mean anything to me anyway. So.
I love that. I think it's a really good answer, and I think you also you touched on something that's really cool, which is the transition, not from just I like doing this, but to keeping yourself sane. I mean, that's something that I think I probably only realized in the past 3-4 years. It was actually making music, making art, staying engaged that way wasn't something that I just felt compelled to do. But if you don't do it, it starts to kind of deteriorate into other aspects of your life, and just it's not great. But I also think the key thing that you're mentioning there is that you're persevering and you're making a dog-headed decision that you're going to be doing this thing no matter what, which is that leads to results one way or the other, right? I mean, that's totally. Without making that intention and following through on it, you'll never know. And I think that's what's kind of the reason I talk about this stuff so much is I know personally what that can feel like, but I also recognize there's so many people out there who have that potential of being an artist or potential of creating art, and not saying hey, I'm gonna only pursue this. That's one way to do it, but even pursuing it at all, and what that can do to someone's kind of soul and being to not pursue those things is that's a travesty. So I'm just acutely interested in always talking about that stuff, because when you see people like you who've done it and are doing it, that's fucking inspiring. You know what I mean? That's just something that reminds everyone else out there that you know what, you can make that decision. It might not always work out the way you want it to, but it's a decision that can be made.
Yeah, no, so well said. And I think I think for a long time, I'm very obsessive. I think probably like lots of artists and creatives. I mean, but I would say, there's nothing I'm more obsessed with than the notion of kind of infecting other people with the confidence of just betting on themselves and being able to not worry so much about having this, kind of very clear-cut safety net. I think people make really kind of, perverse decisions based on the idea that they need, for instance, paid for health insurance, right? But it's just funny when you talk to independent contractors who, pay for their own, like I have for so long. It's that extra $400 a month, which, don't get me wrong, it's insane. And every time I look at it, I'm like, that is so fucked up. I can't believe I'm doing that. I can't believe I'm paying that for so long.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up. But I'm really, I'd rather have that be another thing on the list that I'm like, all right, that's another creative project I just have to make sure happens and provides for this $400 a month, rather than being like, you know what, I really need a company to pay for this for me. You know what I mean? When really you're gonna get shittier health insurance through them anyway, usually, and it's like it's just like an illusion. It's a trap. A lot of people are just afraid to kind of be out on the limb, on the tree limb themselves. They'd rather have some big daddy corporation kind of like really just make everything's good. You have your this, you have your that, and by all appearances, everything is safe and okay and predictable. And
man. Yeah. Well, this is again something that I'm like acutely interested in. I'm also someone who has battled successfully for my entire adult life against having a real job, which freaks the hell out of my wife and my mom. But I truthfully, like, I am willing to do just about anything to not do that and pursue the things that I think are good for not just my bank account, but my mental health, my spiritual health. And I will fight to the last dying breath I have to not do that. Not because I think it's the best way for everyone, but that I also recognize, like you, a long time ago. And I mean, psychedelics and LSD was no small part of this when I started doing it at like a pretty young age, is that like the illusion of safety does not, it's not there. And it's funny we're talking about this and talking about paying for insurance because you use that as a motivator for a creative project, which is like very counterintuitive, but it's really not. And the idea of an employer, especially in this day and age, having your best interests at heart, even if it's a small company, again, is an illusion. Like if something goes wrong with the boss's family or something goes wrong with the manager class families, they're going to take care of themselves, which anyone would do, not even like in a necessarily like evil, fucked up way. It's just kind of how shit works. So it's a very interesting thing when you talk about like, you don't have to buy into this illusion of there's only one way to do that. And what I think is particularly interesting now is I think the material and seemingly concreteness of the illusion, we're actively seeing it being broken apart in our external worlds more than ever now. And I think that's just fucking fascinating. Yeah, dude, that's a very interesting take. I never thought about using the extra cost of insurance as a motivator to make more art, but that's like a clever little technique there, dude. That's so cool.
I think just being around a lot of like graphic designers and people who kind of work with clients on an artistic level consistently, you hear this kind of mindset a lot. Like they're like, oh no, I need to work for a firm. Like I need health insurance. And I just kind of scratch my head like, dude, especially when I see someone that's just so ridiculously talented and has like nothing but all these like personal creative projects that they're like, oh, I just don't have time for my personal work right now. I'm doing client work. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like you could be doing exactly what you want to do at all moments of your day, but you've created this illusion that you don't have time for it because you're comfortable with that client paycheck. And I think I've learned, or at least I'm still learning, that hey, people have to want that for themselves. You can't force that on them.
That's one of the realities of life that I think people constantly learn. It's not something that, you can fully learn it, but you're still going to go into those things because like, I get from you and just, seeing you not only on social media, but hearing you on the podcast too, like this desire to help people is very, very clear. The counter to the wanting to help people is sometimes you want to help people too quickly, or you want to help them if they're not ready, which is its own kind of weird fucking karmic situation. But you can't force people. But I do think what you're doing is probably the best thing one can do, which is just like, win and live your life and share your ups and downs authentically and transparently and honestly, because then, people can see that this is a possibility. You know what I mean? That this isn't something that I think a lot of people, I know this as a musician. I feel like every musician knows this, but they don't talk about it. Like anyone can learn music. Like it is not this fucking secret. Some people, yes, they exist. We know them. Some of us may have some innate talents in certain areas, and it may be a little bit easier to kind of get up that curve. But like anyone can do this shit legitimately, unless you're deaf.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, then like that's the one kind of thing. And even then you can use rhythms. Like there is literally and it's like weird because I think that translates so well to like everything in life. Like there's really, barring physical clear limitations, you can pretty much do whatever the fuck you want. Like that's the truth of life. I mean, yeah, dude, I love that you kind of have this selflessness quality about you that you kind of bring out in other people. I mean, what's that born out of, you know, in yourself? And I know I don't want to paint the picture here that you're immune from negative mindsets. What I'm talking about is, and I know you're not, you've spoken candidly about depression, but this desire to kind of share the love, so to speak, where does that come from?
You know, I think a lot of it, it kind of is a twofold thing where I think the contagious nature of like, you know, the empowerment of doing what you want to do at all times, and kind of just being self-sufficient artistically, whether it's music or just making things in general. Basically anyone who can kind of create their own reality, it excites me so much, because I think that is like the key to everything in a lot of ways, as far as finding a balance of, you know, contentment or whatever. But I think for me, I realized a long time ago with music, how much of it is just so, you know, you can self-teach yourself, and same thing with art. Just in general, DIY mindset has always been a thing that really, it was like a huge eye opener as a young person, realizing, you know, I think again, to reference Sean and Cass, you know, talking about Fugazi and talking about Ian MacKaye, and just the kind of the punk rock mindset of just, you know, don't wait to get invited to the party, like throw your own, like that kind of mindset really got to me at a very young age. And then I think a thing we have in common is, you know, I took LSD for the first time when I was 14. So, you know, that really fucking gave me some different legs to stand on. I just saw through a lot of the stuff, and realized that the most important thing always has felt like human connection and human, you know, kind of creativity feels divine to me, you know. So kind of it all kind of meets somewhere in the middle there. I think I just want to always kind of present people with the idea that what I'm doing is really not that special, and that they could do it too. And that's why I always really had this weird little kind of earmarked note about the whole machine elf, you know, folklore of like, look what we're doing, do what we do, like how they're making shit out of nothing. And I just think like it's just this huge reference to the creative act. And I think about like universes being born and created, and how that can just be the same thing as like making a drawing or a song or whatever.
Yes. I love it. So, dude, how I usually am one of the younger people, you know, in terms of inception with LSD. 14 has me beat by a solid year and a half, I think. What's 14 is, dude, 14. I mean, if I'm thinking back to what I was doing at 14, I was probably just smoking weed. I don't even know how high I was getting, but barely experimenting with that. How did you come to do LSD at 14? What were the circumstances? What was the trip like?
Yeah. So strange, man. You know, it's just about, I think, shifting friend groups and right time, right place.
Yeah, it has to be.
In some people's instances, they would say wrong place, wrong time, wrong
crowd,
thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah. But I would say, you know, thank God for older brothers. I think like, you know, I'm the oldest, but I had a few friends that had older brothers.
Right,
and,
of course.
Basically it was like, you know, started hanging out with some people I met I guess I was middle school, and I remember, we connected over music and then, cannabis right away.
Yeah.
And then, it was like a weekend hang out at my friend's house, who I wound up just kind of staying there like a lot because, his parents were never around, and
Yeah,
we
of
would basically
course.
just kind we'd be recording stuff all the time. We didn't have to worry about noise. And then it was just like, hey, you want to drop some LSD? And I was just like, I knew about, I had seen the movie The Doors, and that was about what I knew about LSD. And I was like, sure, and man, an hour later, all I have to say is just like, I was not, it was so much different than I could have ever imagined. And it just completely, yeah, I can really pinpoint a distinct change in my life and in my personality at that very moment. I mean, your personality is changing
Yes.
at a crazy breakneck, pace at that point anyway. But man, it's almost like it changed it, and then almost like encased it in this like
Yes.
very nice, like protective, like temporary concrete. It's like, you can just be who you really are forever. It's
Yeah.
like, and then I just like skipped a lot of the uncertainty and kind of like insecurity that I saw, kind of running like a virus through most of my friend groups at that time, except for the ones taking LSD, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, really, it just totally changed me, and I don't think I recognized that on a conscious level at the time.
Yeah.
I was just kind of like exploring, but now I can look back and be like, wow, yeah, I really remember that being the first year of my life where I was like, I don't really care if people like me.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
Totally.
I don't really care if like I fit in. I don't care if these people that I really like are not cool to these other people. I'm just going to be cool to everybody. I just kind of made this conscious like choice at that point to do that.
Yeah.
And,
Dude, I fucking love the way you kind of put that. It encased you, it obliterates the idea of personas and creating them, but also kind of gives you this solid core of which to kind of operate for the rest of your life. And I think it makes me really think that in like 50 years, we may actually be giving maybe microdoses, but some type of dosage to like teenagers. I mean, like teen angst is something I understood up until I did psychedelics. After that,
Right.
like, yeah, like you're a teenager, you have hormones, you have all this stuff, but like it coincided, at least for me, and exactly the same way that you're talking about. But right when I did LSD, I got a long-term girlfriend at the place I did LSD at, and she happened to live, I was in Boston at the time, we met at this program, music school, but she happened to live like 20 minutes away from me. So I just like all of my, other things you'd be caring about as like an angst-ridden teenager were immediately fell into place. And I was like, I don't care about what people think anymore. Like I have everything that I want. I'm going to try to carry this. And I remember all I wanted to do after that is turn other people on. I was just telling all of my friends, like, bro, you got to do LSD. You have to do LSD. Like, we're going to do it in this hotel. We'll get it. And I just tried to turn as many people on as possible. And yeah, man, I think it's really interesting that what is often presented as a very dangerous and kind of, might put you on the edge of psychosis, which, let's be clear, can do. But for the teenager especially, that it really can have the opposite effect and kind of like help you see through all of the temporary kind of relative bullshit and recognize that there's something much deeper that you can carry on into, and carry with you into the rest of your life. That's never heard it put like that, but it makes a tremendous amount of sense and totally is in line with my experience. Oh, cool,
that's
dude.
awesome, man.
That's really cool.
I feel the same way about, I mean, I guess there's conflicting things inside of me when it comes to, just kind of being like, you know what, every time anyone turns 13, this should be a coming of age thing.
Right.
Just drop some LSD. But yeah, I mean, I'd have to say I would say I'm 90% in that boat and 10% in the, oh, but watch out for psychosis.
Exactly.
Because I really think that, I mean, there are so many things that you're going to get put through
Right.
in the course of your, young adolescence that are going to put you on the edge of psychosis anyway. And
So true.
probably half of them are going to be prescribed by your doctor
It's so
or
true.
whatever. So, for me, I mean, I'm just so grateful for that experience. And I think that, oh man, I mean, I really think, oddly enough, it also gave me just this really beautiful, like it kind of just like, slowly deteriorated my fear of death in a lot of ways. It was just kind of like, which I think is pretty common for psychedelics. I mean, unless it's the exact opposite, where it just makes death anxiety nonstop. But I mean, for me, it was like I noticed a distinct change in how I coped with loss and death after that, and like kind of a welcoming of it and an acceptance of it, and noticing that in myself, and kind of wanting to be there in those moments for people when they're struggling with loss and grief. Kind of noticing that as a strength of like, oh, okay, I, for whatever reason, I can handle this painful transition phase better than some people can. So I kind of have a gift that I can help others through this time, and I really appreciated that like a lot.
That's really fucking cool. Yeah, I think I am not as advanced as you probably in that sense in relating to death. I always like to think that I am, because in some sense I don't even believe in the concept of myself at all.
For sure.
But then I'll remember my kid gets like a cough and I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on? And it's like, he has a little cold. It's going to be okay. And I'm like, oh God, still have some shit to work out. But yeah, dude, that's really cool that really kind of helped you with that. And then that your next instinct. And I think this is something that what kind of blows my mind about psychedelics is we have had very similar experiences and takeaways from doing LSD. But I know there are people who've done LSD and all, God knows, 5-MeO, just every possible thing you could do, and still seem very much encased in an egoic standpoint, and it blows my mind. I'm like, how did that happen? And I recognize, and this is something that you talked about with Sean and Cass. Again, we're just going to keep referencing them because they really are that great. It does. There's a resonant frequency that I think that some people, when they take a psychedelic, they get back in touch with, and they say, "Oh, that's me. This is me. This is really what it is." And then they can recognize that in other people. And then I think other people just maybe don't even see that or see it, but think it's something else, or add it into their persona or their kind of psyche and carry it around as kind of like an intellectual thing or a superiority thing. And I think that when people recognize each other, this is why I'm just like enamored with you as a person, because I haven't heard people explicitly say this, like, you encourage that. That's what you want to be talking about. That's what you want to be communicating through your art, through your music. Like, that shit is, if more people openly spoke about that, I think the world would clearly be a better place, because you don't see people doing that all the time, which is why they're so easily recognizable when you do see someone doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. And it really, anytime I, like you said, it's a frequency and you pick up on it. And anytime I pick up on anyone else doing that, it just is, it's like, it's like spirit food. It just makes me like, I'm like, oh man, yeah, exactly. Yes. And I'm going to go out and do that more today. And, I kind of seek that out now rather than seeking out the negative, which I think I've spent a lot of my life doing. And when I kind of, everyone, can fall off the path and just kind of get distracted by, big scary monsters, but
it happens to me dozens of times a day.
Yeah, definitely, dude. But yeah, I think focusing on that and focusing, like you said earlier, like the love frequency, just I'm really trying to amplify that and spread that. I love being a satellite for others. I love rebroadcasting other people. I love basically connecting people. And I don't know, I get a huge kick out of basically, just kind of encouraging other people to do that same thing. Like, hey, um, it's awesome that you think I'm cool and you like my music or you like my art or whatever, but like, whatever it is that you do, try to kind of like take whatever it is that you think it's cool, like that I'm interacting with you or whatever, go do that for someone else today.
Right.
Like that's kind of like what I'm always trying to have be the footnote of any interaction I have with
I
other people.
love that, dude. That is fucking an amazing thing to say to someone when you've kind of created, a creative vessel for people to engage with, because it really does. It's like the ultimate paying it forward. Because like it's true. Like the thing is that I've had so many conversations about what makes an artist, who's an artist. Are some people just not ever going to be? And yeah, like the truth is not everyone is going to be a commercially successful pay your bills type artist, at least not in the way the economic system is set up now. But that doesn't mean that it's not, you can't make something amazing that is going to fulfill you in some way. It's not our fault necessarily that the structure of economics in the world doesn't support that type of lifestyle. This is just a collective kind of delusion that's being played out now, which is relatively new in innovation. We haven't been in this capitalistic system for that long in terms of history. So really just like encouraging that to come out. I mean, it's very interesting you mentioned. I remember a very specific trip I had with some friends in a hotel room. It was 411. I remember that because it was like we're in information. We're tripping in information. It was a big part of the trip. But I remember turning to one of my friends who was drawing something, and it was just like really cool. I was like, that's really cool. Like, you're really talented. And I was like, anyone can do this if they want to, but most people don't realize that they can do it. And she's like, do you really believe that? I'm like, yeah, I 100% do, because it's just the desire for someone to do something. If it's in them naturally, it's more likely to come out. But someone who doesn't know that it's there is never going to necessarily dig down and try to find it unless they're encouraged to do that. So it became like a very big part. Like whenever someone was like, hey, I like your music, I'd be like, come, if they're over at my house, I'm like, come play with this MIDI keyboard. Come make all these fun sounds out of this drum machine. Like, you don't, like, my 2.5-year-old can do it. Like, this isn't something that is like, you need tremendous technical skill. I'll set something up so wherever you hit something, it sounds amazing, and you'll make something even cooler. And I think that really is like a metaphor for the type of energy that we're talking about, which is like, just be cool to people. Just be nice to people. And something else that I don't think we've explicitly spoken about, but it's really important, is like this idea of vulnerability, this sense of being vulnerable and letting people see not just the amazing good parts of yourself, but your fears, your insecurities, the failures, those things, like that shit people can relate to. It's harder for people to relate to these outlier success, I'm in a successful band, but like everyone has dealt with like, oh God, I fucked up, or I didn't do this well. And I think that's another thing that's like very cool about you, is like, I see you doing that, especially on social media. Like, you're very transparently honest about this stuff. And it's like, it's a juxtaposition from what you normally see, but it's so fucking sorely needed, man. I mean, could you talk about a little bit of like kind of the, let's say, the not fun aspects of reality, the negative mind states, depressions? Like, how do you deal with those, and kind of what lessons have you learned from that type of stuff?
Man, yeah, for sure. Well, there's so much, there's an abundance of negativity, as there is positivity. It's all it's all there for us, whatever we want. And depending on what you dialed your radio to that morning, you may tune into a station that's broadcasting a bunch of slime, and you may get infected, and or it could just come out from inside of you. I mean, sometimes we just have shit I think so much of our resistance to, say, sharing process, or sharing like you put it, like there's nothing magical about what I'm doing. I can show you how to do this if you really want it. That's the biggest ingredient you need, is desire to do this, because the second one is time. And just really uh, not being afraid to fail. Like these are all things that basically can really free you and allow you to discover things. But I think a lot of times we don't recognize that, say, like an artist who's gotten, a bunch of, you know, uh, fame or even just like some status on social media and all that stuff, you can kind of notice which ones are really confident and which ones are kind of like, oh my god, I'm a fraud. I mean, we all think we're frauds. That's normal. But I mean, I think being afraid to share your secret sauce and thinking that, oh my god, if people know how I do this, they're not going to think it's great anymore, and they're not going to think I'm this magical thing or whatever. That really is like it's a reflection of inner pain and insecurity, and basically this thing where you're seeing your psychology of why maybe are kind of doing the Sisyphus thing of being an artist, and like I want to be recognized as being amazing, and I want people to think like, oh my god, how did they do that? Like, but like for me, it's just the total opposite. It's like I remember very distinctly having 10 years ago already being in a band that's successful, but feeling like I needed my own outlet, and I always connected to making visual art, and so on my downtime, around like our second record, I just started like drawing again, and I started painting again, and because we had a local record store that we all love so much, like basically they got all their shit seized, like they owed taxes and all this stuff. And so we did this fundraiser thing to try to get them a new location. And thankfully, like they actually got it, and they're still around today.
Awesome.
Like, it's pretty awesome. But that gave me like kind of the gall to sell the stuff I was making, because I was making it for someone else. So I feel like that's a good hack for anyone who's going through that, like, oh god, like, who do I think I am? I'm not an artist. Like that whole really difficult thing where we, crossing the threshold from, okay, I make doodles to, oh, I sell doodles, Right. I think it's like, for me, the negative stuff is when I get obsessed with, everything that is the opposite of that. When I get obsessed with, why don't I have more followers? Like, why don't I have more money? Why don't I have more success? Like this other person who I see as a contemporary that is like, why are they getting all this like sunshine and I'm over here getting rained on? Like, the second I go down that rabbit hole, it's like, basically taking an X-Acto knife and, opening all the stitches of all the wounds I've had from like, being a conscious being all the way to now. And that just plays itself out in a way of like, oh, I'm suffering. And I mean, that's basically, it's a very simplistic way to see it, I guess. Obviously there's complications to all of our daily struggles, and there's chemical parts of it, and some of it are just like emotional. But I think for me, it's just like trying always to recognize when you're off center, and be like, all right, something's off, and I need to get back to where I was. And until you recognize that, I think you're kind of like a boat, like just kind of like drifting off, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, where the fuck am I? Like, how did I even get here? So I think it's, not to use the ridiculously trendy word of mindfulness, but like, I think, it's all mindfulness. It really is.
It's interesting because mindfulness is obviously an overused term and word, but if we really identify, even if it's not in words, but in our own minds, the idea of being able to recognize something that maybe is pain is usually a good waker upper in terms of recognizing something, because you're acutely aware of something like pain. But when you add that idea of reflecting on it, that's where the mindfulness comes in. And you can basically say like, all right, well, this is what's going on here. What the fuck do I do And more importantly than just the mindfulness that you mentioned, I think that metaphor of, opening up with an X-Acto knife your wounds and scars and stitches, like, dude,
Mm-hmm.
that is spot fucking on. That comparative nature that we can so easily fall into. And like, you and I both know this, but when we're in that mindset, we don't think about it, but like, we don't know what the fuck is going on with other people usually. We're 99.9% in our own heads so much of the
Mm-hmm.
time that, like, to even whatever our created image of someone else's success is, like, we don't know what the fuck is going on. We don't know what internal struggles or family struggles or relationship struggles anyone else is really going through unless we're very good friends with them. It
Mm-hmm.
really is. And even then, you don't always
Mm-hmm.
know. You don't have an exact,
That's right.
replica of their consciousness. But that really does seem to cause like the majority of pain for people in life. And I think once you can get more adept at dropping it or recognizing when it's going on, it does kind of smooth shit out, because that's that's the second arrow, right? In Buddhism, that's, you got shot with an arrow and then you're reflecting on it and dwelling on it is the second arrow. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you're doing it to yourself and it's not needed. You already have a fucking arrow in you. You don't have to shoot another one. So but you really nailed it. Like, that is when you kind of go off center. And the truth is, a lot of people just live their lives off center. They don't even know there's a center. That's where the mindfulness comes in. But yeah, man, like that can really fuck people up. It really, really can, including myself when I see it. But I think you touched on something that's really cool, is this idea of, especially in the day of social media, day and age of social media, I just did something which I really never thought I would do because I spent so much time. It's brought me a lot of money. I've helped a lot of people with it. Is I left Facebook 2 days ago. I was like, you know what?
Wow.
And I was like, listen, here's the thing. The way I've justified staying on there for so long is I have business pages. I have pages where if I want to send traffic to a website or sell something or increase downloads, I have this ability to do it. So I'm like, all right, I don't want to just throw that away. I mean, I've taken time to build it up. But man, like, I unfollowed a shitload of people because I didn't like what was coming into my consciousness on a daily basis. I wasn't signing up for it. And that wasn't doing it. And I realized, all the privacy stuff that's coming out with Facebook, how just what they're doing to our attention and harvesting and pushing us to these different directions that maybe we don't want to be pushed in. I was like, you know what? This shit is not healthy. So I'm going to leave it. I just to be clear, I'm still on Twitter. I will fucking use Twitter to the day I die if it's around, just because I love the idea of selectively tuning into what you want to tune into in a chronological fashion. And I use Tweetbot, which allows me to do that. I don't see it on the app.
Nice.
So basically, like, the truth is like, I was like, this is something that I think most people won't do. They're not going to voluntarily leave social media. There's a lot of compelling reasons, and endorphins being one of them, and serotonin being another, that people want to stay on these things, but it doesn't seem to be making people happier on the whole. And I think that, to me, is something that I feel confident in saying, because I haven't had a lot of conversations with people. I'm like, hey, how does Instagram make you feel? And they're like, great. Makes me feel fucking awesome all the time, because there's this, what you're talking about, like, you can see people who are only showing you this one dimension of their lives over and over again, and that's just not how things work in life. No one is their Instagram. No one, unless they're showing like the fucked up things that are going on. Like, I always joked about there should be an Instagram for like when you get in fights with like your significant other, or like you spill some shit, you break something, and you should have like documents of that, because like that shit's relatable. It's also probably be hilarious, but like the truth is we don't want to present those aspects of ourselves to other people, because it's uncomfortable, it's scary, it's vulnerable, which is why when someone like you is out there kind of just like willingly doing that, not in like a look at me type of way, but just sharing earnestly and honestly in a helpful way, like that's the antidote to that stuff. That makes social media enjoyable. It makes it real, and it makes it helpful, I think, more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all just about realizing the neutrality of everything, and realizing that there is this black and white, yin and yang thing going on at all times. And I think it's social media is just this perfect example of it at all times. Anytime you want to you can find the slime, you can find the negativity at any point. You could also find the most inspiring thing in the world at any point. So
Right.
it's like really, it's right there. And as far as like interacting with it is such a tricky fucking thing, and I think it is for me a thing that ever since I finally succumbed to the dark side and was like, fuck it. I
Yeah.
resisted for a long time. When the band first started, it was right when MySpace was really kind of exploding, and
Right.
we made a band account, and none of us had personal MySpaces, and we thought, it'd be really cool to, keep it that way, and we also thought it would be cool to not sign any of our names we'd post updates, but it would always just be like from like the we, the us,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it was like this really like kind of kind of naive like way of like trying to battle the ego issue of all
Yeah.
of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it was so clear like, oh my god, this is just narcissism, it's
Right.
rampant, but I think it just slowly got its claws in me, and then eventually it was like one day somebody signed their name on a post, and then the next day someone else did, and then all of a sudden we were all just signing our names, and then we had our own accounts, and then sure enough it was like we each had our own Facebook eventually. And but when I did finally join Facebook, it was specifically to try to kind of sell my more of my work, like more of my art and stuff, and I kind of used that as the reasoning behind it. And then sure enough, like
Yeah.
to this day, it in many moments where I struggled to stay on there, the business aspects of it were what was keeping me on there, and I'm still on there now. But I'd say what keeps me in general in a place where I'm like, I really actively try to use it in a way that is, every day I try to do what I can to just like infect other people,
Yeah.
with kindness and with vulnerability, like you said, and just the idea that like, hey man, it's cool. Like you can wear that mask if you want to, but like you really don't need to,
Well, you're a Facebook bodhisattva, is what you are. Is you're staving off your eventual enlightenment to remain and shepherd people across in a dark, dark place. So I appreciate that. Yeah, it's really what you're doing. I mean, it's weird. Like I get. I think the main thing, and I'm really just analyzing this with you because it's been on my mind, is the main thing that is freaking me out about Facebook, and all Twitter is not that much better. It's the idea that our personal relationships are the product of something that's being sold to other people that really
Yeah.
tipped me over the edge. Like I knew it was going on. I had a Facebook account right after it opened because I was in Boston and they opened it up to all the Boston colleges then. So I've been on it for a very long time. It wasn't always like that. I mean, I remember setting up the initial pages for businesses in like 2008, 2007, sometime like that. It used to be a very different place, but now having used it both as a marketer and a user and seeing how people kind of relate to things like follower numbers or likes or metrics and all these things, and what the
Mhm.
tangible benefit is for the end user, meaning you and me spreading positivity on Facebook or just, sharing podcast episodes, it becomes kind of a game of, I've seen it become a game of diminishing returns for the end user and increasing returns for Facebook and corporate people who are mining all of this data, which really at a certain point I think will hit a critical mass and people will be like, fuck this shit, like there's something else we can use. But
Mhm.
I also don't like the idea that we don't get to shape what we're choosing to pay attention to online, at least, right? In our
Yeah.
lives, we can't choose what's coming in. We've picked our relationships and what we're going to pay attention to, and things filter in from there. But the idea that I'm going to be being fed stuff that makes me angry or I don't want to see, and that I
Mhm.
don't really have any intention of dealing with at that point, so it's not going to lead to some positive change in my life. It's just something that's either noise or negatively affecting my mood that I am not choosing to see. I
Mhm.
really was like, that's a very destructive tool more than it's worth it. And again, like I want to be very clear about this for anyone listening and you included, like I don't judge anyone who's on Facebook, staying on Facebook. I was having a great time. I mean, I left when I was actually pretty much enjoying most of my time there. It was just a conscious decision that like I was logging in like an inappropriate amount of times to see shit that I didn't want to see. And I'm like, I have to make the personal choice at this point to reassess this relationship. And I'm not like unplugging. I'm not cutting the cord. Like I think it's probably not a bad idea for a lot of people. I love Twitter. I check Twitter hundreds of times a day. Fucking love it. So it's not that, but it is kind of this like we're moving into a very weird kind of era where relationships are becoming the main economic driver of our society, which is like no one really talks about this shit because we don't have time to think about it, but that's really what's going on. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, it's total like it's like capitalistic inception. It's like earlier today I was texting my friend because he you know I wished him Merry Christmas yesterday, and then he sent me back this thing. It was like just this comment about like I wish people would choose kindness over consumerism or something like that. And like as I read that, I was searching for like a funny Bitmoji to send him. And in the Bitmojis, there was a Bitmoji that was an ad with my with my likeness, and it just had me like as a reindeer, and it said like buy Bitmoji merch. And I was like, oh my god, they're selling me images of myself. This is fucking crazy. Right? I was like, that's goddamn genius. Like, but yeah, I just sent that back, and he's just like, wow, resistance is futile. I was like, yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not. And like, for as much as I get kind of like cynical about this stuff, I remain very optimistic about the rate of people recognizing this stuff. And even if we're not all actively leaving kind of our corporate overlords in masses and mass protests, the truth is that as the awareness begins to increase about this type of stuff, I think we then can have the conversations that ultimately lead to the better systems emerging. And I see that even with something like, which is a terrible name, and I have a podcast network, podcasting is just a bad name for what we're doing here, which is just kind of like spreading the seeds of dynamic interaction. That's all it is, which is very much kind of, to me, the antithesis of how most social media, at least from a consumer or corporate commercial standpoint, is used, which is we are going to pre-produce something to elicit a response to get you to do something that benefits us, which is like no one, if you think about any entity, any post as a person who's approaching you, and if that's how they were approaching you, no one would stand for this shit. Like if there was just always someone around you who's posting like amazing vacation pictures, just like, I am going on the best vacation ever, it's just for me and my family, you'd be like, fuck out of here. I'm not gonna hang out with you anymore. You're terrible. But that's what we kind of get bombarded with. It's just like I kind of am on this crusade, which is like, it just sounds stupid to say, but I really seek out authentic people, which to me doesn't mean like you're being real or anything. It just means that we're seeing a complete picture of a person. Do you know what I mean? We're not just seeing one side of things, which to me is like, you know, I got heavily involved with the spiritual kind of nonprofit world. And I was ultimately, I got very jaded for a long time because I thought it was going to be immune from that type of posturing. And I know this is laughable, right? It's like the stupidest thing to ever think. And I got a very heavy dose of like, not only is it not immune, it's like you're going to be dealing with the most hyper inflated egos you can possibly imagine. These people genuinely think a lot of times they're enlightened or they have some real thing to teach you that you don't have. And that can only lead to just like craziness. But I really, now when I see anyone, you know, whether they're an artist, whether they're a temp, whether they're someone who's unemployed and doesn't know what the fuck they're going to do, when someone's just being themselves, like it just, I seek that out more than ever these days. And it turns out a lot of those people do happen to be artists and musicians, because what the fuck else are we going to do? But yeah, man, it's been an emerging theme, especially in the past 2-3 years of my life. And, you know, I'm really grateful that I get to like interact and meet people like you who are doing this shit. Sean and Cass and all the other people who I've had on this podcast who kind of are exuding that frequency. it's what keeps me optimistic about the future of this planet, of our culture, of our society, because like there's a lot of people these days who exude this a lot.
Yeah. I love the Mad Libs aspect of what you just said as far as the spiritual nonprofit movement. I feel like you can just take that out and plug in punk rock. You can
Right.
plug in psychedelics. You
Right.
can plug in like all there's so many things that you would think would be immune to you know, egotistical, capitalistic, whatever, but it's like it penetrates every part of reality as long as it's you know, pervasive in that culture, and it obviously is our
Yeah.
culture. So
Yeah.
it's everywhere, and I you know, that's I think probably why um you know, people like yourself and myself, like, you know, find a lot of comfort in the notions and ideas of Buddhism and other you know, kind of mindsets that are similar, kind of seeing it all as one thing and seeing it
Yeah.
all as no good, no bad, everything is just kind of like perfect as it is. And I know that's a very controversial thing to say these days, but you know, I try to just like really let that be the only truth in a lot of ways, you know, because everything else seems debatable and confusing. But if I just look at it all as one thing and allow for it to all be as it is, and interact with it the way that makes me feel good, that's the only thing I can really do to get
Yeah.
through it, because otherwise it's just like it feels like you're trying to, it's like that feeling when you're in a very, very heavy trip and you think that closing your eyes is somehow going to make it all disappear, but then it's actually way more vivid.
Yeah.
Like, no, there's no escape. There is no escape.
Yeah, your own personal Clockwork Orange that you can't get away from no matter what you're
That's
trying
right.
to do. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's true. And the idea of everything being perfect is controversial because when we get stuck in a dualistic perspective, it is the most disputable and easily disputable thing that is like, oh, well, there's starving kids in Africa. There's two
That's
kids just
right.
died in Border Patrol custody. That's perfect too, buddy. And it's like, listen, on one level, like, no, that's horrible. Of course, it's the worst thing ever. But on another level, like if this was the karma that was planted by those two amazing souls to wake up another segment of the populace to the terrible fucking things that are going on, in some sense, that is kind of like the perfect way of doing it. And it's a very difficult thing to kind of live in the state of open-mindedness and open-heartedness. They sound like really great things to aspire to because it's like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, we want to be open-minded. You don't want to be a closed-minded prick. You want to be open-hearted. You want to be a dick to people and uncompassionate. But if you are really living in those states constantly, you're going to be challenged by pretty much everything you encounter in this reality, which is the kind of like devastating beauty of it if you really think about it. But
That's right.
it's weird that this is we think about those two terms, which if you asked anyone, even the most diehard Trumpian, they'd want to be open-minded and open-hearted at their, like, at least to their family, but it's not a very comfortable thing, right? It's not always it's not always going to bring you happiness in the sense of how we like to think about happiness, right? Which is
No.
accepting things as it is. That's what we should be doing, but we want to just feel good all the time, which is, if there's one thing, this is why Buddhism is still so popular. If there's one thing we know in life, it is it's not going to be great all of the time. There's no one who's lived that life yet. Period. They haven't existed. So, yeah, dude, it's a very, listen, I know there's the Chinese curse that, you know, may you be born in interesting times. I really do think it's a blessing, man. I find this stuff to be amazing, even the terrible, horrible shit, because it is this neutral slate that you can kind of put your own perspective on. And if your perspective is everything is perfect, I just have to figure out how. I mean, what better way is there to go through life, right? I mean,
Yeah, and I think it's also, I mean, it's a misleading way to label it, like a saying perfect, because people
Right.
just attribute
Right.
only good things
Right.
to perfection or whatever.
Right.
It's just a way of like, summing it all up. It's just saying, there's not much of this that you can control, and maybe that's just the way it was designed. And you can kind of only you can it's just it's the whole grasping thing. It's all there. It's like it's such a it's all built into our nature, of the way we are, and so much of our suffering and our agony is us trying to fight against who we are,
Yeah.
and be the opposite of that. And that just, I don't know. I mean, it's not like I haven't spent years upon years doing that very thing
Of
and
course.
suffering in that same way. But once you wake up to it and kind of realize like what you're doing, at the very minimum, you can kind of like watch yourself and sort of laugh at it.
Yeah, and recognize and laugh at just kind of the monuments and systems we've built that reinforce that idea. Like it's like that. Just to be clear, like I don't think it's a natural human response to
Mhm.
the way culture and society has evolved. I think what it is it's a reaction to difficult and fearful situations where we try to insulate ourselves, and then it turns into a system, and then it turns into a codified system of laws, and we do all of these
Mhm.
things to not deal with our shadow side and the fucked up shit in ourselves. But then we forget that like now these things are running us as much as anything else. We've created a fucking system that's anything but egalitarian. We're constantly competing with each other in so many ways, which is why, again, when someone like you comes along, which is why Sean and Cass can recognize this, they're the greatest beacons for this. When someone comes along and they're like, listen, we don't have to be competing like this. We don't have to be constantly trying to prove that we're better or we have some magical thing. For those of us who are like, oh my God, someone else knows this too. It's like, that's how the emerging paradigms like actually emerge. You need that to happen, because otherwise we're just thinking this shit in our own head. You're old enough like me to remember 10, 15 years ago, regardless of what was going on in our individual lives, society and culture, these conversations were not coming out like they are today. Period. There's fucking 20 podcasts on MindPod Network. There's hundreds and thousands of podcasts where people are talking about similar things or in their own way talking about similar things. Like that shit didn't exist, but it was like Coast to Coast AM was as weird as you were getting about like anyone talking about something that wasn't like normal, so to speak. So we are moving towards, whether people think it or not, we are moving towards different things that are substantially different than the way things operate now. And it's nice to be able to connect with someone like you who's actively doing it, man.
Oh man, well, right back at you. I mean, I think the whole idea about podcasting kind of representing, in a lot of ways, the antithesis of what we've been discussing, kind of like the viruses of social media and the kind of narcissism culture and all that kind of stuff. It's like podcasting. The second I found podcasts many years back when like I think it was like season 1 of WTF or something, I was like getting into. But I recognized like the reason why it was so soothing to my soul to engage in this was I had been starved of long form conversation, and so many people are. And I think it's just it's worthy of like examining the idea of, for every action, there's a reaction. I think like, entertainment and media and culture are no exception to this. So when we have basically become this like, sound bit culture for, a couple decades, shorter and shorter and shorter and more concise and more concise and more filtered and more whatever, all of a sudden to hear somebody just talk openly for an hour to 3 hours is just nothing but like, oh, this is the best. At least I know that like this is not being pushed to me by some weird overlord or whatever. This is just, I'm just listening to people be people. And I don't know, there's something really I get really excited when I think about just like where podcasting is going to be in 10 years. I think it's we haven't even seen like, it's still in its
Oh,
baby years,
it's infancy. It's a very weird kind of evolving system, and I think we're going through a pretty transformative period with it right now. And people always ask me, because I have just to be clear, like I have a podcast network in the sense that the way you like amplifying cool signals, that's what MPN is. It's nothing more.
That's
There's
right.
not like some built out structure to this thing that there's some profit sharing model where it's just, hey, this is shit that I have identified as cool. I know there's a platform that people tune into. Let me just add cool people to it. That's literally all it is. There's nothing else. And yeah, man, like that dynamic aspect of the best conversations in life, whether they're recorded or not, are when people are just honest and open with each other. And so if you're used to having conversations like that, that's just your life. But if you're not and you don't see it, it is kind of revelatory, and it is something that you can immediately pick up on. Is someone putting on airs? Are they trying to project their perspective only? And when you actually hear people just engaging, it reminds people of kind of what we're here for, which, is probably the most highfalutin way I could talk about a podcast, but it is nevertheless kind of what I think about them.
Well, obviously, I mean, you're so right about all that, and I think MindPod is a really great example of how I think it's kind of a similar. I mean, I draw a parallel line between podcast networks to record labels now, but like the cool record labels that really fucking blew my mind when I was young, because they would basically do that same thing. It's like, oh, like Fugazi got huge, but they also recognized that they had power with that popularity, and they kept Discord records going throughout that, and then put all the bands that they thought were important on that label, because they knew there was a good percentage of the people listening to them that would want to be checking out other music that they thought was cool. So
yeah, man.
I love that idea of just kind of like, you're basically just making your own little world, your own little like record label of podcasts that are awesome.
I've never heard it put like that, and I fucking love that description, because that's kind of what it feels like. And like I consider, the people on MindPod, for the majority of the people, like those are my peoples, like those are my family, whether we talk often or not. Like they know that if they need something, they can come to me, and I know that for most of them, I could do the same. And it's kind of just connecting people together, which is probably the theme of this podcast more than anything, the one you and I are having. Dude, I have immensely enjoyed this. I have to run to go take care of my son, but I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I want to end with the questions. But before I do, where can people find out more about everything you know? Give them your website at the very least.
Yeah, you can go to, it's colinfrangicetto.com. And if you have to Google that to figure out how to spell it, then I don't blame you. And you can kind of find everything else about me through there, but I'm basically at Colin Circa most other places, Instagram, Twitter. Yeah, I mean, you can find me if you want to.
And I'll link out to everything. I just know some people listen and they're like all geeked up from the conversation. They're like, I want to connect with this person. And then they hear you say it and they're like, I'm doing that right now. But don't do it if you're driving, obviously. But
you can always send me an email at colincirca@gmail.com.
I love it, dude. All right. Last questions. Again, this has just been really, really fun. If you're ever in the city again, let me know. I'll try to come in because I would love to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So favorite color?
Favorite color has fluctuated over my life, but I'd say at the moment it is blue.
Nice. Favorite number?
33.
Ooh, that one's, man, I think you're the second person in like a few episodes to say that. That one's been popping up everywhere for me recently. Everywhere recently.
Same.
I think that's when how old Jesus was when he left his mortal coil, I believe. As a Jew, I know these things. What is your favorite animal?
Oh man, cover your ears, dogs. I have dogs and cats.
See, I'm the I grew up with a cat, and now I have a dog, and I'm a cat person, and I love my dog.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but I know in my soul it's cats. Last question: what's a practical tip that has helped you in your life that you could share with people listening?
Practical tip is that if you think and act as if there's always a future, then you can kind of relax and know that you don't have to be perfect today. Just kind of like realize that you're always a work in progress, and that life is a work in progress. So
I love it. Colin, thanks so much for doing this, man. I really enjoy tuning into you on a daily basis, and we're friends now. I can't wait to meet you in real life, dude. So awesome.
Absolutely, brother. Right
Sweet.
back at you. Thank you so much. It's a total honor to be on this podcast finally, after listening for so long. And I think everything you're doing with MindPod is just, it's a fucking blessing. I really appreciate it all. So thank you.
Man, that means a lot. Thanks a lot, dude. All right, we'll be in touch, bud.
Yeah, man. Text me anytime. Send me GIFs and nudes and whatever.
I will. All right, will. Nudes, of course.
All right, buddy.
Peace, bud.
All right, see you.
But we have a strange anxiety that if we don't interfere, it won't happen. And that's the root of an enormous amount of problem. Life is earnest, and I've got to go on. Then your life is a drag, and not a gain. Now, it's my contention, my personal opinion, this is my basic metaphysical axiom, let me put it that way, that existence, the physical universe, is basically fatal. There is no necessity for it whatsoever. It isn't going anywhere. That is to say, it doesn't have some destination that it ought to arrive at.
Thanks for listening to that episode. A reminder, go check out Colin at colinfrangicetto.com. Go check out his band, Circa Survive, and tune in to what he's doing on Twitter. That's where I'm hanging out. I've made a not so grand proclamation to disassociate from Facebook just for a little bit. Sorry for people who tune in there. We got Discord, we got Twitter, I like Reddit. I think I'm going to split my internet time between those three for the foreseeable future. So go check out Twitter on Colin. That's my advice to you. So yes, go tune into him. He's a wonderful human being, and I will see you next week.